If I had known that one drink would erase my control, I never would have stepped into that bar that night. But the music was loud, the lights were soft, and for a moment, everything felt normal, almost safe. I remember laughing at something my friend said, the condensation on my glass cold against my fingers, the taste slightly bitter, but I didn't question it. I should have, because a few minutes later, the room started to tilt. Not dramatically, just enough to make me blink twice, then 3 times, my heartbeat slowing in a way that didn't feel right, my fingers loosening around the glass as it slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a dull crack that nobody seemed to notice. Or maybe they did, and I just couldn't hear it anymore. Everything sounded distant, like I was underwater. I tried to steady myself against the edge of the bar, but my arm didn't respond the way it should. It felt heavy, disconnected, like it belonged to someone else, and that's when I realized this wasn't just dizziness. Something was wrong, seriously wrong. I opened my mouth to call for help, but my voice came out as a breath, barely there. My vision blurred at the edges as shapes moved around me. People laughing, glasses clinking, a normal night continuing while mine quietly fell apart. I remember thinking I needed to get out, just get outside, fresh air, that would fix it, but my legs didn't cooperate. They buckled slightly as I tried to step away, and suddenly there was a hand on my waist. Firm, guiding, not gentle, not asking, just taking control. Hey, easy there. A voice said close to my ear. Too close. I didn't know him. I was sure of that. But he acted like he knew exactly what was happening, like he'd been waiting for this moment. My stomach dropped even as my body refused to react properly. I tried to pull away, but my strength wasn't there. My hands weak, my movements slow, delayed, like I was trapped inside my own body watching everything happen half a second too late. I've got you, he said, and something in his tone made my skin crawl. Not comfort, not concern, something else, something calculated. I shook my head, or at least I tried to, but it barely moved, my thoughts racing faster. Then my body could follow. This isn't right. I don't know you. I need to leave. But the words wouldn't come out, just fragments of breath. My heart started to pound harder now, panic cutting through the fog. But it wasn't enough. Not enough to fight back, not enough to break free. And then everything changed in a single second. The hand on me disappeared, not gently removed, stopped, like it had hit an invisible wall. There was another presence now, closer, stronger, still. I couldn't see clearly, but I felt it, the shift in the air, the way the noise around us seemed to drop without anyone saying a word, like something had just entered the room that didn't belong to the same world as the rest of us. And then I heard his voice, low, calm, controlled in a way that made my chest tighten. Touch her, and you're dead. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through everything, precise and absolute. And for the first time since this started, the man who had been holding me hesitated. I could feel it even through the haze, the tension, the sudden uncertainty. I forced my eyes to focus, just enough to catch a glimpse. A man in a dark suit, perfectly still, his hand wrapped around the other man's wrist, not aggressive, not shaking, just in control, complete control, the kind that didn't need to prove itself, the kind that already had. I didn't understand what was happening, didn't know who he was. But something inside me shifted, just slightly, the panic easing by. A fraction, because for the first time, someone was there who didn't feel like a threat. The grip on my arm loosened completely. I felt myself sway as my balance gave out again, and before I could fall, another hand caught me, steady, careful, nothing like the first. This one didn't take. It supported. I barely registered being lifted, guided. The world slipping further out of focus as I leaned into something solid. Something that didn't move, didn't falter. I wanted to ask what was happening, who he was, why he helped me. But my thoughts were fading too fast, everything pulling me under. And the last thing I remember before the darkness closed in was his voice again, softer this time, closer, not for anyone else to hear, just for me. You're safe now. And even as everything went black, one thought lingered. Sharp and impossible to ignore. Safe. But from who? And why did it feel like he already knew the answer? I woke up to silence. Not the kind you get in the middle of the night, but the kind that feels expensive, controlled, like even the air knew where it was allowed to go. My eyes opened slowly, the light above me soft and warm instead of harsh. And for a second I did not remember anything. just the weight of my body, against something too comfortable to be mine, sheets that felt smooth against my skin, the faint scent of something clean, almost unfamiliar. Then it came back all at once. The bar, the drink, the way my body stopped listening to me. My breath caught as I pushed myself up too quickly, the room tilting again, but this time it was slower, manageable, my hand gripping the edge of the bed as I forced myself to focus. This was not my apartment, not even close. The ceiling was high, the walls a muted cream color, everything around me precise, intentional, nothing out of place. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my feet touching a soft rug instead of the cold hardwood I was used to. And that was when the fears settled in properly, quiet but sharp. I did not know where I was. I did not know how I got here. And the last thing I remembered clearly was losing control. My chest tightened as I looked down at myself. Still fully dressed, nothing disturbed. Just my shoes missing, placed neatly by the bed like someone had taken the time to think about it. That detail should not have mattered. But it did. It made everything feel more deliberate, more planned. I stood slowly, testing my balance. One step, then another, my body still weak, but no longer betraying me. And then I saw him, not moving, just standing near the window like he had been there the entire time, watching the city below with his hands resting loosely at his sides. The same man from the bar, the one whose voice cut through everything. I froze, my heart skipping before picking up speed again. "You are awake," he said without turning, his voice exactly the same, calm, steady, like nothing about last night had been unusual. I swallowed, forcing my voice to work this time. "Where am I?" It came out rough, weaker than I wanted. He turned then, slowly, like he had no reason to rush. And for the first time I saw him clearly in daylight, tall, composed, dressed in a way that looked simple until you noticed how perfectly everything fit. His eyes finding mine with that same unsettling focus, not invasive, not careless, just certain. "You are safe," he said again, the same words from before, but now they felt heavier, like they carried something he was not saying. I shook my head slightly, the movement grounding me. "That is not what I asked." There was a pause, not long, just enough to feel intentional, like he was deciding how much to tell me. "My home," he answered finally, and the simplicity of it made my stomach tighten, because nothing about this place felt normal, nothing about him did either. "How did I get here?" I asked, my mind racing now, trying to piece together the gaps. He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You were not in a position to leave on your own." Not a lie, but not the whole truth either. I could feel it. I crossed my arms without thinking, a small attempt at control. "So you just decided to take me." The words came out sharper than I expected, and for the first time, something shifted in his gaze, not anger, not offense. Something closer to recognition, like he had expected that reaction. "I decided you were not staying there," he corrected, his tone even, but firm enough to end the argument before it started. I exhaled slowly, my head still spinning but my thoughts clearer now. "The man at the bar," I said, watching his reaction closely. "Who was he?" A flicker of something crossed his face, gone too quickly to name. "Someone who made a mistake," he replied, and the way he said it made it sound final, like the situation had already been handled in ways I did not understand. A chill ran through me, despite the warmth of the room. "And you?" I pressed. "Who are you?" This time the silence stretched a little longer, not uncomfortable, just heavy, like the answer mattered more than I realized. He stepped closer, not invading, but closing the distance enough that I could feel the difference in presence, the kind that made everything else seem less important. "Luca," he said, nothing more, just a name. But the way he said it carried weight, like it was supposed to mean something, like it did mean something. I frowned slightly, waiting, but he did not elaborate, did not offer anything else, and somehow that told me more than a full explanation would have. This was a man who did not explain himself, not unless he chose to. I glanced around the room again, trying to steady myself, trying to think clearly. "I need to go home," I said finally, and for the first time, there was no hesitation in my voice, no weakness, just certainty. His eyes held mine, steady, unflinching, and for a second I thought he would argue, would refuse, but instead he nodded once, slow, deliberate. "You will," he said, and something about the way he said it made me pause. Because it was not immediate, it was not now. It was later, conditional, I felt. It before I understood it. What does that mean? I asked quietly, the tension building again. He did not look away, did not soften. It means, he said, his voice dropping just slightly, enough to pull me in whether I wanted it or not, that someone put something in your drink last night, and that was not random. My breath caught, the room suddenly feeling smaller despite its size. What are you saying? I whispered, even though part of me already knew. He took another step closer, not threatening, just certain, like every movement was calculated. I am saying, he continued, you were being watched before you ever walked into that bar. My heart slammed against my ribs, louder now, faster, the pieces shifting into something I did not want to see. That is not possible, I said quickly, shaking my head, because the alternative was too much, too dangerous. He did not argue, did not raise his voice, just held my gaze with that same unshakable calm. It is not possible, he repeated softly, or you do not want it to be. The words landed heavier than they should have, and suddenly the memory of the night felt different. The man, the timing, the way everything unfolded, too precise, too intentional. I took a step back without realizing it, my mind racing faster than I could keep up. Why would anyone do that? I asked, more to myself than to him. But he answered anyway. That is what we are going to find out. The way he said we made my chest tighten again, because it implied something I was not ready to accept, something I did not fully understand yet. And then he added, quieter this time, almost like a confession, because I do not believe in coincidences, and I definitely do not believe you were one. And for the first time since I woke up, the fear shifted into something else, something deeper, because whatever had happened last night was not over. Not even close. I should have left the moment he said that, should have walked out, called a ride, gone back to my apartment, and convinced myself it was all just a terrible coincidence. But my feet did not move. My body stayed exactly where it was, like some part of me already knew that stepping outside this room would not take me away from whatever had started, it would only drop me right back into it without understanding any of it. I crossed my arms tighter, trying to hold on to something familiar. You are wrong, I said, even though my voice did not carry the same certainty anymore. Nobody is watching me. I am not important. The word felt small as soon as I said it, and his expression did not change, not even slightly. Importance is not always obvious, Luca replied, his tone calm, almost quiet. But there was something underneath it, something that made it clear he was not guessing. He knew something. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head again. You do not know me, I said. But even as I spoke, a memory surfaced, faint, easy to ignore. The feeling of being looked at on the subway last week, a car parked too long outside my building 2 nights ago, things I dismissed at the time because they did not make sense, because they were small, but now they lined up differently, and I hated that. I hated that my mind was starting to connect things I had chosen to forget. I know enough, he said, and that stopped me, my eyes snapping back to him, sharp, alert. What does that mean? I asked, the tension rising again. He did not answer right away, and that silence said more than anything else could have. It was not hesitation, it was selection, like he was choosing what version of the truth I could handle. It means, he said finally, that last night was not the first time someone tried to get close to you. My stomach dropped, cold and sudden. That is not true, I said quickly, too quickly, because if it was true, then I had missed it. I had walked through it without seeing it, and that felt worse than the idea itself. You are thinking about it now, he said, watching me, not accusing, just observing, the moments that did not make sense. I looked away, my jaw tightening, because he was right, and I hated that he was right. I hated that a stranger was the one forcing me to see it. Even if that is true, I said, forcing my voice steady, that does not explain you. I turned back to him, holding his gaze this time. Why were you there? The question hung between us, heavier than anything else so far, because it mattered, because it changed everything. He did not look surprised, did not deflect, just studied me for a second longer than necessary. I was there because I was told to be, he said, simple, direct, and that answer did not make me feel better, it made everything worse. By who? I asked, my voice quieter now, more careful. He held my gaze, and for the first time, there was something else there, not uncertainty, but something close to restraint. That is not a question you need answered. Yet, he said, and the calm in his tone made it sound final, like pushing further would not get me anything. I felt frustration rise in my chest, sharp and immediate. You do not get to decide what I need, I said, taking a step forward without realizing it. And for a second, the space between us felt charged, not dangerous, but intense, like something invisible had shifted. He did not step back, did not react, just watched me. And that stillness was more disarming than anything else. Right. Now, he said quietly, I do. The words should have made me angry, should have pushed me further, but instead, they landed in a way I did not expect, because part of me knew he was not saying it out of control, he was saying it out of certainty, and that difference mattered more than I wanted to admit. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders tightening as I tried to pull myself back into something logical, something grounded. So what happens now? I asked, and this time, my voice did not waver. He shifted slightly, just enough to glance toward the door, like there were things happening outside this room that I could not see. Now, he said, you leave here, you go home, and you do exactly what you would normally do. I frowned, the answer not matching the tension building around everything else. That is it. I asked, skeptical. He looked back at me, his expression unreadable. No, he said. And there it was again, that quiet weight behind his voice. That is the part you see. A chill ran down my spine, subtle but unmistakable, and the part one do not see. I pressed, because I needed to understand something, anything. He held my gaze for a moment, and then he said it, not loudly, not dramatically, just with that same controlled certainty. The part you do not see is me making sure it does not happen again. My breath caught slightly. Not because of the words, but because of the way he said them, like it was already decided, already in motion, like this was not a plan, it was a fact. I looked at him, really looked at him this time, trying to understand what kind of man spoke like that. What kind of man stepped into a situation like last night without hesitation, without question. Why? I asked, and this time, the question was different, quieter, more honest, because I was not asking about the situation anymore. I was asking about him. He did not answer right away, and for the first time, the silence felt different, not controlled, not calculated, just still, like even he did not give that answer easily, because, he said finally, his voice lower now, you were not supposed to be touched. The words settled into the space between us, simple, but heavier than anything else he had said, and I did not know what to do with that, did not know how to respond to something that felt both protective and possessive at the same time. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, because the truth was, I did not know what question to ask next. I did not know what direction this was going. All I knew was that last night had not been random, that someone had been watching me, and that the man standing in front of me had stepped in like he already knew it would happen. And just before I could speak again, before I could push further, there was a soft knock at the door, precise, controlled, and Luca's eyes shifted slightly, just enough to tell me everything I needed to know. Whatever was happening outside this room had just changed, and I had a feeling I was about to find out how much deeper this really went. I did not move when the knock came. But Luca did not need to say anything for me to understand that everything had just shifted. The air in the room tightened, not with panic, but with precision, like something had entered a sequence that was already planned. He did not rush to the door. He did not even raise his voice. Just a quiet, come in, and the handle turned. Immediately, like whoever was on the other side had been waiting for that exact moment. The man who stepped inside did not look surprised to see me, which somehow made it worse. He was older, maybe mid-40s, dressed as sharply as Luca, but with a different presence, less quiet, more aware. His eyes flicked to me for half a second, then back to Luca. We have confirmation, he said, his tone low but direct, like he was delivering something that mattered. Luca did not react outwardly, but I saw it. The subtle shift in his posture, the way his attention sharpened just slightly. Say it, Luca replied, and there was no hesitation in his voice, just expectation. The man nodded once. The same vehicle from 2 nights ago was seen again this morning, 3 blocks from her building. My stomach dropped before I could stop it, my mind instantly pulling that memory forward, the car I had noticed, The one I told myself was nothing. I felt Luca's gaze shift toward me, not questioning, not surprised, just confirming what he already knew. You see, he said quietly, and it was not directed at the man, it was directed at me. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. That does not mean it is about me, I said. But even I could hear the weakness in it now. The way the certainty I had clung to was slipping. The man by the door spoke again, more careful this time, like he was aware of me listening. There is more, he added, and something in his tone made my chest tighten further. Luca gave a small nod, permission without words, the bartender from last night. The man continued. He remembered who served her drink. The room felt smaller, quieter, like every word mattered more than it should, and he paused just briefly. It was not the usual staff. My breath caught, my thoughts racing, because that meant it was planned, not random, not an accident, something intentional, something targeted. I looked at Luca, really looked at him, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. He had known. Maybe not everything, but enough to be there, enough to step in at exactly the right moment. You knew, I said. The realization hitting harder than I expected. He did not deny it, did not soften it, just met my gaze directly. I suspected, he corrected, and the difference mattered, because suspicion meant preparation. It meant he had been watching, just like someone else had been watching me. The thought sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the room. That is not better, I said quietly, and I did not mean it as an accusation, just a fact, because now I did not know which side of this I was standing on. He stepped closer again, not to intimidate, not to close me in, just enough to keep me from drifting too far into my own thoughts. No, he agreed, his voice steady. It is not. The honesty in that answer caught me off guard. I expected deflection, control, something, but not that, not agreement. The man by the door shifted slightly, clearly aware that he was standing in the middle of something more personal than he intended. We are still tracking movement, he added, bringing the focus back. But whoever this is, they are being careful. Luca nodded once, processing, calculating. I could almost see it happening behind his eyes, the way he was already 3 steps ahead of whatever came next. Good, Luca said finally. That means they think they have time. The man gave a small, knowing nod, like he understood exactly what that implied. And they do not, he replied. Luca's gaze shifted back to me then, and the room seemed to narrow around that moment, like everything else faded out. You are going home, he said, and this time it was not a suggestion, not even a discussion, just a decision. I blinked, thrown slightly by the sudden shift. After everything you just said, I replied, my voice sharper now. You think that is a good idea? He did not hesitate. I think it is necessary. He answered, calm, certain, and that word, necessary, carried weight. It meant there was a reason beyond me, beyond safety, something strategic, something I was not fully seeing yet. Explain, I said, because I was done accepting half answers. He held my gaze, steady, unflinching. If they are watching you, he said, then they expect you to act the same, to go home, to continue, to not know. My mind followed the logic even as I resisted it. And if I do not, I pressed. He shook his head, slightly. Then they change their approach, he said. And we lose the advantage. We, again, that word that kept pulling me into something I had never agreed to. I exhaled slowly, my thoughts racing, because he was right. As much as I did not want him to be, it made sense. And that was the problem. It made too much sense. And what happens to me in the meantime? I asked, quieter now, more honest. Because this was the part that mattered. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes did, something more focused, more direct. Nothing happens to you, he said. And there was no hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. Because I will not let it. The words settled into the space between us, heavy, undeniable, and I realized then that this was not just about control, not just about strategy. This was personal to him in a way I did not understand yet, and that made it more dangerous than anything else. I looked away for a second, just long enough to steady myself, to breathe, because everything about this was moving too fast, shifting too quickly, and when I looked back at him, I saw something I had not seen before, not just control, not just calculation, but intention, clear and unwavering, like he had already decided how this would end, and I was just now catching up to it. You said I was not a coincidence, I said slowly, testing the words. He nodded once. You are not, he confirmed, simple, final, and I felt that same chill again, deeper this time, because that meant this was bigger than I thought, bigger than one night, bigger than one mistake, and just as I opened my mouth to ask the next question, the one that mattered most, his phone vibrated quietly in his hand. He glanced at it once, and in that single second, I saw something change, not fear, not concern, something sharper, more immediate, like a piece of the puzzle had just fallen into place. He looked back at me, his voice lower now, more focused than before. They just moved, he said, and my heart dropped instantly, because whatever this was, it was no longer waiting. It had already begun the moment he said it. Everything inside me went still, not calm, not safe, just still, like my body understood before my mind could. Catch up? What do you mean they moved? I asked, my voice quieter now, tighter, because something about the way he said it made it clear this was not a guess. This was real. This was happening now. Luca did not look away from me, but his attention had already split, part of him still here, part of him somewhere else entirely, calculating, tracking, deciding. It means, he said slowly, like each word mattered. They are no longer waiting for you to come back to them. My stomach dropped, sharp, and immediate. So they are coming to me, I said, and it was not a question, just a realization. He gave a single nod, small, controlled, and somehow that was worse than any explanation. The man by the door stepped forward slightly, his voice more urgent now. We have a location ping, but it is inconsistent, like they are testing proximity. I did not fully understand what that meant, but Luca did. I could see it in the way his expression shifted just enough to sharpen, to focus. How close? Luca asked, and there was something in his tone now, not fear, but something faster, more immediate. The man hesitated for half a second. Within a mile, he answered, and that was when my chest tightened completely. A mile was nothing. A few minutes, less if they were already moving. I felt my pulse pick up, louder, faster, my thoughts scrambling to catch up to a situation I had never agreed to be part of. You said I was going home, I said, my voice sharper now, because that plan suddenly felt impossible. Luca did not react to the edge in my tone, did not argue, just adjusted, seamlessly, like the plan had always been flexible, like this was just another version of what he expected. You still are, he said, and I stared at him, unable to hide the disbelief now. How is that even possible? I asked, and for the first time, there was no attempt to sound calm, no attempt to control how this looked, because none of it made sense anymore. He stepped closer, just enough to pull my attention fully back to him, grounding me whether I wanted it or not. Because they are not expecting you to leave here with me, he said, and the words landed differently, not as reassurance, but as strategy, something precise, something already in motion. You are going to walk out of this house, he continued. Get into your car, and drive home exactly the way you always do. I shook my head immediately. And they will follow me, I said, the fear finally cutting through everything else, clear and undeniable. He did not deny it, did not soften it, just met my gaze directly. Yes, he said, and the honesty of that answer made my breath catch, because it meant this was not about avoiding them. It was about letting them think they were in control. That is not protection, I said, my voice quieter now, more strained, because I could feel the logic pulling me in even as I resisted it. That is bait. The word hung between us, sharp, unavoidable, and for a second, I thought he would deny that too, would try to reframe it into something easier to accept, but he did not. It is both, he said instead, and something in his tone made it clear he was not apologizing for that. Not even slightly. I stared at him, searching for something, anything that would make this feel less insane, less dangerous, but all I found was certainty, unwavering and absolute, like he had already decided this was the only way forward. You are asking me to trust you, I said, and this time, the words felt heavier than anything else, because that was what this came down to, not the plan, not the situation. He held my gaze without hesitation. I am not asking, he said quietly. I am telling you that you are safer with me than without me. The statement should have made me angry, should have pushed me to walk out right then and prove him wrong, but it did not. Because part of me already knew it was true, and that was the part that scared me the most. I exhaled slowly, my hands tightening slightly at my sides as I tried to steady myself, to think clearly. And if something goes wrong? I asked, not because I wanted to challenge him, but because I needed to hear the answer, needed to understand how far this control actually went. His expression did not change, not even a flicker. It will not, he said, and there was no hesitation, no doubt, just certainty so solid it felt immovable. I shook my head slightly, almost in disbelief. You cannot promise that, I said, but even as I spoke, my voice lacked conviction, because the truth was, he sounded like someone who could, someone who had done this before, someone who did not make promises lightly. He stepped closer again, just enough that I could feel the difference in presence, the way everything else seemed to fade when he was this close. Watch me, he said, and it was not a threat, not a command, just a statement, simple and controlled, but it settled into something deeper, something that made my chest tighten in a way I could not explain. The man by the door cleared his throat softly, pulling the moment back to reality. We do not have much time, he said, and Luca nodded once, already shifting back into motion, into control. Get the car ready, Luca instructed, his voice precise now. Focused, the man moved immediately, leaving the room without another word. And suddenly, it was just the two of us again, the silence different this time, heavier, filled with everything that had not been said. Luca looked at me, really looked at me, and for a second, the intensity in his gaze softened just slightly, not enough to change anything, but enough to make it feel intentional. You are going to walk out of here like nothing is wrong, he said, his voice lower now, more direct. You are not going to look back. You are not going to hesitate. You are not going to give them a reason to think you know. I nodded slowly, not because I was fully convinced, but because I understood what he was asking, what he was expecting, and more importantly, what would happen if I did not. And you, I said, my voice quieter now, more focused, because this part mattered too. Where are you? He held my gaze for a second longer, and then he answered, simple, certain, everywhere you need me to be. The words should not have meant anything. They should have been vague, dismissive, but they were not. They carried weight, intention, something deeper than just strategy. And as I turned toward the door, as I took my first step into something I could no longer pretend was normal, I realized that whatever this was, whatever had started last night, I was already in the middle of it. And there was no going back, only forward. Exactly the way he planned it. I did not remember unlocking my car, but suddenly I was there, my hand on the door handle, the metal cool against my skin, my reflection faint in the window. And for a second, I just stood there, breathing, trying to make my body feel like it belonged to me again, like I was still in control. The driveway behind me quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that felt intentional, like everything was waiting. I could feel it, even if I could not see it. I opened the door slowly, forcing my movements to stay normal, steady, just like he said. Do not hesitate. Do not look back. Do not give them a reason. I slid into the driver's seat, my fingers wrapping around the steering wheel, grounding myself in something familiar, something real. The engine started with a low hum, and for a moment, everything felt almost normal again. Almost, until I glanced at the rearview mirror, just a quick look. Just enough to check, and there was nothing, just the long stretch of driveway and the closed gates behind me. No movement, no sign of anyone watching. But that did not mean anything anymore. I knew that now. I pulled out slowly, careful, controlled, the tires rolling over gravel before hitting smooth pavement. And as the gates opened automatically in front of me, I felt it again, that shift, like crossing a line I could not step back over. The road stretched out ahead, familiar, ordinary, the same route I had driven 100 times before, and yet nothing about it felt the same now. Every car passing by felt like a possibility. Every stoplight a moment too long. I kept my hands steady, my eyes forward, just like he said. Act normal. Be normal. Even if nothing about this was normal anymore. I turned onto the main street, the city coming back into view, people walking on sidewalks, traffic moving, life continuing like nothing had changed. And that was the strangest part. Everything looked the same, but I was not. I could feel it in the way my heartbeat stayed just a little too fast. in the way my eyes kept flicking to the mirrors without meaning to, searching, checking, waiting for something to reveal itself. I passed the coffee shop on the corner, the one I stopped at almost every morning, the same barista behind the counter, the same couple sitting by the window, everything exactly as it should be, and yet I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched, not directly, not obviously, but somewhere, just out of sight. I tightened my grip on the wheel slightly, forcing myself to breathe slower, deeper. You are fine, just drive, just get home. I repeated it in my head like a rhythm, like something I could hold on to. The traffic light ahead turned red, and I slowed to a stop, my foot pressing the brake, the car idling softly around me. I stared straight ahead, refusing to look too much, refusing to search, because searching would mean I knew, and knowing would change everything. A car pulled up behind me. Then another. Normal. Just normal, I told myself. But then I noticed it. Not the car itself. Nothing about it stood out. Just a dark sedan, average. Forgettable. But it stayed exactly 2 cars behind me through the last 3 turns. Not gaining, not falling back. Just there, consistent, deliberate. My chest tightened. Just slightly. But enough. Enough to make it real. Enough to confirm what I had been trying to ignore. They were there. They were following me. I kept my eyes forward, my expression neutral, forcing my body not to react, not to show anything. Just like he said, do not give them a reason. The light turned green, and I moved forward with the rest of traffic, steady, controlled. The sedan still there, still 2 cars back, like it was part of the road itself. My mind raced, every instinct telling me to turn, to change direction, to do something. But I did not. I could hear his voice in my head, calm, certain, act normal. I turned onto my street, the familiar line of buildings coming into view, my apartment just a block ahead. And for a second, something inside me twisted, because this place, this routine, it was supposed to be safe, it was supposed to be mine, and now it felt exposed, like something fragile had been cracked open. I pulled into my usual parking spot, the engine idling for a second longer than necessary, as I forced myself to stay calm, to stay in control. I turned it off. The silence, settling around me again, heavier this time. More aware, I reached for my bag, my movements slow, deliberate. Just another normal moment. Just another normal day. I opened the door and stepped out, the air cooler than before, brushing against my skin, grounding me just enough to keep moving. I locked the car behind me, the click louder than it should have been, and started toward my building, my footsteps steady against the pavement. I did not look back. I did not check. I just walked, just like he said, but I felt it, stronger now, closer, like the distance between me and whoever was watching had closed, like they were no longer observing. They were waiting. I reached the entrance, my hand brushing against the door handle, and for a split second, I hesitated, not enough to stop, just enough to feel it. That moment where everything balanced on a single choice. Then I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The familiar hallway greeting me with its soft lighting and quiet hum. The door closing behind me with a muted sound, cutting off the outside world in an instant. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders dropping just slightly. Not relief, not yet, but something close to it. I made my way to the elevator, pressing the button, the seconds stretching longer than they should. And just as the door slid open, I caught a glimpse of movement through the glass of the entrance. Just a shadow. Just a shape, but it was enough to confirm everything. They had followed me all the way here. My heart pounded once, hard, before I stepped into the elevator, turning just enough to see the doors close, sealing me inside. The small space suddenly feeling too quiet, too still, and as the elevator began to rise, I realized something I had not allowed myself to think before. This was not the end of the plan. This was just the beginning, and somewhere, unseen but unmistakably present, he was already watching everything unfold exactly the way he said it would. The elevator moved too slowly, each floor lighting up one by one like a countdown. I could not stop, my reflection staring back at me from the metal doors, pale, tense, trying too hard to look normal. I forced my shoulders to relax, my breathing to steady. Just another person going home, just another ordinary moment. But my heartbeat would not listen. It stayed just a little too fast, just enough to remind me that nothing about this was ordinary anymore. The door slid open with a soft chime. and I stepped out into the hallway. The familiar carpet under my shoes, the same faint scent of cleaning solution in the air, everything exactly the way it had always been. And yet I could not shake the feeling that it had changed, or maybe I had. I walked toward my apartment, each step measured, controlled, my keys already in my hand. I did not rush. I did not hesitate. Just like he said, act normal. Be normal. My door came into view. The same number, the same small scratch near the handle from when I dropped my keys last winter. Details I had never thought about before now suddenly felt important. Grounding. I reached the door, sliding the key into the lock. The click louder than it should have been, and for a split second, I paused, not because I wanted to, but because something felt off, not obvious, not something I could point to, just a subtle shift, like walking into a room where someone had been standing a moment before you arrived. I pushed the door open slowly. Stepping inside, the familiar space wrapping around me, my couch, my kitchen counter, the soft glow of afternoon light through the window, everything exactly where it should be. I closed the door behind me, locking it automatically, my hand lingering on the handle for a second longer than necessary. Listening, waiting, nothing, just silence. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders dropping slightly. Not relief, not completely, but enough to move. I set my bag down on the table, my movements careful, deliberate, like I was trying not to disturb something invisible. My eyes scanned the room without making it obvious, nothing out of place, nothing missing, everything exactly the same. And yet that feeling stayed, quiet, persistent. I moved further inside, checking the kitchen, the bedroom, the bathroom, each space the same as I left it, untouched, normal. And that should have made me feel better, but it did not, because now I knew normal could be staged, normal could be part of something else. I returned to the living room, my hands resting lightly on the edge of the table as I tried to think, to process everything that had happened, everything he said, the car, the bartender, the way this was not random. My phone buzzed suddenly, the sound sharp in the quiet, making me flinch before I could stop it. I looked at the screen, an unknown number, my chest tightened instantly, a cold wave of realization washing over me. This was it. This was part of it. I hesitated for half a second, then answered, because not answering would be a reaction, and I could not afford that. Not now. Hello, I said, my voice steady, controlled. Even though my grip on the phone tightened slightly, there was a pause on the other end, just long enough to feel intentional. Then his voice, low, familiar, cutting through everything else. You made it inside, Lucas said, and the tension in my chest shifted instantly. Not gone, but different, sharper, more focused. You are watching me, I said quietly, not accusing, just stating what was obvious now. There was no denial, no hesitation. Yes, he replied, simple, direct. Where are you? I asked, my eyes instinctively moving toward the window, then away again, forcing myself not to search, not to reveal anything. Close enough, he answered, and something about the way he said it made it clear that the distance did not matter, not to him. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in his voice, in the control he seemed to have over everything. They followed me, I said, keeping my tone even, like I was reporting something ordinary. There was a brief pause. Not surprise, just confirmation. I know, he said. And of course he did. Of course he already knew. Then what now? I asked, because this was the part one could not see, the part he controlled, the part one had to trust without understanding. Now, he said, his voice lower, more focused, you do exactly what you would normally do. I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath instead. There is nothing normal about this, I said, and for the first time, there was a slight shift in his tone, not disagreement, not correction, just something quieter. No, he said. But they need to believe there is. I closed my eyes for a second, just long enough to steady myself, to push down the instinct to question everything, to run, to break the pattern, because breaking the pattern would break the plan, and I understood that now, whether I wanted to or not. So I just stay here, I asked, opening my eyes again, focusing on the room, on something real. You stay, he confirmed. You move, you sit, you breathe. You exist exactly the way you always do. His words were precise, controlled, like he was mapping out every step before I took it. And you, I said again, needing to hear it. needing to know he was still there. What are you doing? There was a slight pause, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something different, something sharper, more deliberate. I am watching who else is watching you. The words sent a chill through me. Not fear exactly, but something close to it, something deeper, because it meant this was bigger than just one car, one person. It meant layers, connections, things I could not see. I walked slowly to the couch, sitting down. My movements natural, controlled, just like he said, my phone still pressed to my ear, grounding me in something steady. And when you find them? I asked, quieter now, because the answer mattered more than anything else. There was no hesitation this time, no pause, just certainty. Then they stop, he said, and something about the way he said it made my chest tighten again, because it was not a possibility, it was a promise. I looked around my apartment, at the life I had built, the small, ordinary details that suddenly felt fragile, exposed, and for the first time, I understood something I had been avoiding. This was not just happening to me. It was about me, and whatever reason was behind it, whatever connection I had not seen before, it had already pulled me into something I could not walk away from. And as I sat there, pretending to be normal while everything around me shifted into something else, I realized that the most dangerous part was not the people watching from the outside. It was the fact that someone had been waiting for me to notice all along, and now that I had, there was no going back to not knowing. I tried to breathe like nothing had changed, like this was still my apartment, and not some stage where every movement mattered. My fingers resting lightly on the edge of my phone as I lowered it from my ear. The call already ended, but his presence still there, lingering in the silence like he had not really gone anywhere. I stood up slowly, forcing my body to follow a routine I barely remembered. Kitchen, water, something simple, something normal. I reached for a glass, filled it halfway, took a sip, the coolness grounding me just enough to keep going, just enough to keep from thinking too far ahead, because thinking too far ahead meant seeing something I was not ready to face yet. I set the glass down, my movements steady, deliberate, just like he said. Exist exactly the way you always do. I walked toward the window without meaning to, stopping just short of it. Not close enough to look out directly, just enough to feel the light against my skin, the faint reflection of the room in the glass. I did not search, I did not scan, but I knew they were still there, somewhere, watching, waiting, the same way he was. Only different. One side hidden in shadows, the other hidden in control. I turned away from the window, moving toward the couch again, picking up a book I had left there days ago, something I had been reading absent-mindedly before all of this started. I opened it, my eyes scanning the page without really seeing the words, just the motion, just the act, normal, ordinary, safe. Except it was not, because every second that passed felt measured, like something was building outside this room, something I could not see but could feel, a pressure, subtle but constant. My phone buzzed again, the sound quieter this time, but sharper, more deliberate. I looked down, the same unknown number, my chest tightening before I even answered, because I knew it was him. I answered without hesitation, keeping my voice level. Yes, I said, not even pretending it was anyone else. Do not move, Lucas said immediately, his tone different now, tighter, more focused than before, and that single change sent a wave of tension through me, because this was not part of the calm plan anymore. This was something else, something immediate. What is happening? I asked, my voice low, controlled. Even though my pulse had already started to rise, there was a brief pause, not uncertainty, just calculation. They are not outside anymore, he said, and the words landed heavier than anything else he could have said, because outside meant distance, outside meant time, and now that distance was gone. Then where are they? I asked, my eyes instinctively scanning the room, the door, the hallway, every space suddenly feeling too open, too accessible. His answer came slower this time, more deliberate, closer than they should be. My breath caught slightly, my grip tightening around the phone. That does not help, I said, sharper now, because I needed something clear, something real. It means, he said, his voice lowering just enough to pull me in completely. They are testing the boundary. I frowned slightly, my mind racing to catch up. What boundary? I asked, and this time, there was no hesitation in his answer. Mine. The words settled into the silence around me. heavy, controlled. And for the first time, I understood something I had not fully seen before. This was not just about me being watched. This was about someone challenging him, stepping into something that belonged to him. And that realization changed everything. So this is not just about me, I said quietly, the pieces shifting into place in a way that felt both clearer and more dangerous. No, he replied. But you are the reason it started. I exhaled slowly, my mind trying to process that. Trying to understand how I could be connected to something like this, something I had never seen, never been part of. What do I do? I asked, because that was the only question that mattered now. His answer came immediately, precise, controlled. You stay exactly where you are. I nodded slightly, even though he could not see it. My body already still, already following that command without question. And you, I said again, because I needed to hear it, needed to know he was still in control of whatever this was. What are you doing now? There was a shift in his tone, subtle but undeniable, something sharper, more immediate. I am removing the variables, he said, and even though he did not explain it, did not need to, I felt it, the certainty, the finality in his voice, like whatever was happening outside this room was already being handled, already moving toward an outcome he had decided. I swallowed, my eyes fixed on the door now, not because I expected it to open, but because it felt like the center of everything, the line between safe and not safe, between known and unknown. How long? I asked quietly, because time felt different now, stretched, uncertain. He paused for a fraction of a second, just enough to measure his answer. Not long, he said, and there was no doubt in it, no hesitation, just the same unshakable control he had carried from the beginning. I stood there, still, listening, the silence around me louder than anything else, every small sound amplified, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint movement of air through the vents, things I had never noticed before now suddenly impossible to ignore. And then, just as I started to feel the tension settle into something unbearable, there was a sound, soft, almost nothing, coming from just beyond the door. My breath caught instantly, my body going completely still without thinking, my eyes locked on the handle, waiting. And in that moment, I realized something I had not allowed myself to think before. This was not just about being watched anymore. This was about being reached, and just as the handle shifted ever so slightly, my phone pressed tightly against my ear. His voice came through again, lower now, more focused than ever. Do not open that door. And for the first time since this began, I did not question him, not even for a second, because whatever was on the other side was no longer part of the plan. It was something else entirely. I did not breathe. I did not move. I just stood there with my eyes locked on the door as the handle shifted slightly. Not enough to open, just enough to confirm that someone was on the other side. Real, present, waiting. My fingers tightened around the phone, pressing it closer to my ear like it was the only thing anchoring me to something stable. Do not open that door. His voice repeated, quieter now, but sharper, more precise, and I nodded instinctively even though he could not see it, my body already obeying before my mind could question it. The handle stilled for a second, then moved again, slower this time, like whoever was out there was testing, waiting for a reaction, any reaction. I forced myself to stay completely still, not even shifting my weight, not even letting my breathing change, because he said they were testing, and I understood now. Any movement, any hesitation, any sound, it would give something away. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, pressing in from all sides. My heartbeat loud in my ears, too loud. I was sure they could hear it. I was sure everything inside me was too loud. They know you are inside, Lucas said calmly, his voice cutting through the tension like a line drawn in place. But they do not know what you know. I swallowed, my throat dry, my eyes still fixed on the door. What do they want? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, but steady, controlled, because losing control now would mean losing everything. There was a pause, not long, just enough to feel intentional. They want to see if you are alone, he answered, and something about the way he said it made my chest tighten further, because that meant this was not just random, this was deliberate, calculated, personal. The handle stopped moving completely, the silence returning in full force. Heavier now, more aware. Like the moment before something changes, I held my breath without realizing it. Waiting, listening. And then there was a soft knock, not loud, not aggressive, just casual, like a neighbor, like someone who belonged there. And that made it worse, because it was not force, it was familiarity. It was designed to make me question, to make me hesitate, to make me open the door without thinking. Ignore it, Lucas said immediately, his tone firm, leaving no space for doubt. I nodded again, my body still locked in place. The knock came again, slightly louder this time, more insistent, but still controlled, still measured, like they were not in a hurry, like they had time, like they expected me to respond eventually. I felt the urge rise, strong and immediate, to step forward, to ask who it was, to break the silence, because that was normal, that was what anyone would do. But I did not move. I stayed exactly where I was, just like he said. The knock came a third time, then stopped, the silence returning once more, deeper this time, heavier, like the moment had passed but something else had taken its place. Good, Lucas said quietly, and that single word shifted something inside me. Not relief, not completely, but something close to it, something steady. They were waiting for that, he continued, and I exhaled slowly, my body finally releasing just a fraction of the tension it had been holding. So what happens now? I asked, my voice still low, still controlled, because this was not over. I could feel it. The absence of sound outside the door did not mean they were gone. It meant they had changed. Now, he said, and there was a shift in his tone again, something more focused, more precise. They adjust. I frowned slightly, my mind trying to follow, trying to stay one step behind him instead of completely lost. Adjust how? I asked, and there was a brief pause, like he was watching something unfold in real time. They moved to a different approach, he said, and the way he said it made it sound inevitable, like this was expected, like this was part of a larger pattern I could not see. I glanced toward the door again, the handle now completely still, the hallway beyond it silent. But the feeling remained, that presence, that awareness, like I was still being watched even without movement. Are they still there? I asked quietly, and for the first time, there was a slight delay before he answered. Not hesitation, just calculation. Not at your door, he said, and that answer sent a different kind of tension through me. Because not at my door meant somewhere else, somewhere closer than before, somewhere I could not predict. Where then? I pressed, my grip tightening again. He exhaled slowly, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, more controlled than ever. Inside the building. The words landed heavy, immediate, undeniable. My breath caught, my eyes instinctively moving toward the walls, the hallway, every direction at once. Because inside meant there was no barrier anymore, no clear line between outside and safe. That was not part of the plan, I said, and I did not mean to sound panicked. But the edge was there, sharp and real. No, he agreed, calm, steady. It was not. And somehow, that calm made it worse, because it meant he had already accepted it, already adjusted, already moved forward. So what do I do now? I asked, because that was all I could do. Follow, trust, stay in place. He did not hesitate this time. You stay exactly where you are, he said again, firm, unchanging. You do not move. You do not open anything, and you do not make a sound unless I tell you to. I nodded slowly. Even though he could not see it, my body already locking into stillness again, my ears straining to pick up anything, any sound, any movement, the apartment suddenly feeling too open, too exposed, every shadow holding more weight than it should. And you? I said, my voice quieter now, more focused, because this part mattered more than anything else. Where are you? There was no pause. This time, no hesitation, just certainty, closer than they think, he said, and something in those words shifted everything, because it meant this was not just reaction. This was positioning. This was control. Even now, even with the plan changing, he was still ahead of it. I stood there, completely still, my eyes fixed on the door, the silence stretching longer than before, heavier, like something was about to happen again. And just as I started to feel that pressure build, just as my mind started to race ahead of what I could see, I heard it, not from the door this time, but from somewhere deeper inside the building, a faint sound, distant but unmistakable, and before I could even process it, before I could even ask what it meant, his voice came through the phone again, lower. Now, more focused than ever. They just made a mistake. And the way he said it made my chest tighten, because it did not sound like a warning. It sounded like a conclusion, like whatever was about to happen next had already been decided. The words did not register at first, not completely. They just echoed in my mind like something distant. They just made a mistake. And I stood there, frozen, my eyes still locked on the door, even though the sound I heard had come from somewhere deeper inside the building, my breath shallow, controlled, waiting for him to explain, for him to tell me what that meant, because mistake did not sound like something small. It sounded like something final, something that shifted everything. What does that mean? I asked quietly, my voice steady but tighter than before. There was no pause this time, no hesitation, just the same calm certainty that had carried through every moment since this began. It means they stepped into a space they should not have, Lucas said. And the way he said it made it clear this was not about rules. This was about lines, boundaries that were not supposed to be crossed. I swallowed, my grip tightening on the phone. And now? I asked, because that was the part one needed to understand, the part that determined what happened next. His answer came softer, but sharper, more precise than anything before. Now they are visible. The words settled into the silence around me, heavy, deliberate, and I realized what he meant. They had been hidden before, distant, careful, watching from the outside. But now they had come closer. Now they had moved inside. And in doing that, they had exposed themselves. They had made themselves part of something he could see, something he could reach. I stood there, completely still, my eyes shifting slightly from the door to the hallway beyond it, imagining movement, imagining presence, even if I could not see it directly. So this is good, I said slowly, trying to follow, trying to understand the logic behind something that felt anything but safe. For me, he corrected, and something about that distinction made my chest tighten again, because it meant this was not over, not for me, not yet. I exhaled slowly, forcing my thoughts to stay clear, to stay focused. What happens to them? I asked, and for the first time, there was a slight pause, not hesitation, just a shift, like he was choosing how much to say, how much I needed to hear. They leave, he said finally, simple, controlled, but there was something underneath it, something unspoken, something final that I did not fully understand but could feel. I nodded slightly. Even though he could not see it, my body still locked in place. My ears still tuned to every sound around me, the silence stretching again, but this time, it felt different, less like waiting, more like something already in motion, something unfolding just out of sight. Stay where you are, he added, his voice lower now, more focused. This part will be quick. I did not ask what that meant, did not question it, because I already knew better than to interrupt whatever was happening now. I just stood there, listening, waiting, the seconds passing slower than they should, each one stretching into something longer, heavier, my mind trying to fill the silence with possibilities I did not want to think about. And then, faintly, from somewhere down the hall, I heard it, not loud, not clear, just a shift, a movement, like someone stepping away instead of closer, like something retreating instead of advancing. I held my breath, my body still completely still, my focus narrowing on that single detail, because it was the only thing I had, the only thing I could measure. The sound faded quickly, replaced by silence again, but this silence felt different, lighter, less pressured, like something had lifted, like something had been removed. It is done, Lucas said quietly, and the simplicity of it made my chest tighten again, because whatever had just happened, it had already been decided before I even knew it started. I exhaled slowly, my body finally releasing just a fraction of the tension it had been holding, my shoulders dropping slightly, my grip on the phone loosening just enough to feel real again. They are gone, I said more as a confirmation than a question. Yes, he replied, and there was no doubt in his voice, just the same steady control, the same certainty that had carried through everything else. I glanced toward the door again, the handle still, the hallway beyond it silent, empty. And for the first time since this began, I believed it, not because I could see it, but because he said it, and that realization hit harder than anything else, because it meant I trusted him, not completely, not blindly, but enough to accept something I could not verify on my own. I stepped back slightly, my body finally moving again, my legs feeling heavier than they should, like they were catching up to everything that had just happened. "So it is over," I said, the words quieter now, almost careful, because I was not sure if I believed them. There was a pause on the other end of the line, longer this time, heavier, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, not less certain, but more deliberate. "This part is," he said, and that answer told me everything I needed to know, because it meant there was more. There was always more. I closed my eyes for a second, just long enough to steady myself, to take in what had just happened, what it meant, what it changed. And when I opened them again, the room looked the same, my apartment, my space, my life. But it did not feel the same anymore, because now I knew how easily it could be reached, how easily it could be watched, how easily it could be pulled into something else. "Why me?" I asked finally, the question coming out quieter than I expected, but heavier, more real, because this was the part one still did not understand, the part that had started everything. There was a pause, not brief, not immediate, but intentional, like this answer mattered more than the others. And when he spoke again, his voice carried something new, something deeper. "That is what I am going to find out," he said, and for the first time, it did not sound like a plan. It sounded like a promise. I nodded slowly, even though he could not see it, my mind still trying to process everything, still trying to connect pieces that did not fully fit yet. "And until then," I said, my voice steady again, more grounded than before, because this was my reality now, whether I wanted it or not. There was no hesitation in his answer, no pause, no uncertainty, just the same unshakable control. "Until then," he said, "you are not alone." The words settled into the silence around me, simple, direct, but heavier than anything else he had said, because they changed something, something inside me, something I had not realized was shifting until now. And as I stood there, in the quiet of my apartment, in the aftermath of something I had not seen, but had felt every second of, I realized that whatever this was, whatever had started with one drink and one moment of losing control, it had already become something else, something bigger, something that was no longer just about danger, but about connection, about control, about a man who had stepped into my life like he already knew exactly where I would be. And as the silence settled fully around me, I understood one thing clearly. This was not over, not even close, and whatever came next, it would not be something I could walk away from. I stayed where I was long after the call ended, the phone still in my hand, the silence in the apartment settling into something almost unfamiliar, not empty, not peaceful, just aware, like the space itself had changed and had not yet decided what it wanted to be. I exhaled slowly, my shoulders lowering just a fraction, but the tension did not leave. It shifted, deeper, quieter, like it had found a place to stay. I moved finally, one step, then another, my body remembering how to exist in a space that no longer felt entirely mine. I picked up the glass of water from the counter, taking another sip, the coolness grounding me again, simple, normal, something I could control. I set it down carefully, my fingers lingering against the edge of the glass as I thought about everything that had just happened, everything I had not seen but had felt every second of. They had been here, inside the building, outside my door, close enough to reach, and then just as quickly, they were gone, not because they chose to leave, but because he decided they would, and that realization settled heavier than anything else, because it meant something I had not fully accepted yet. I was no longer just reacting to what was happening. I was inside something controlled by someone else, someone who moved faster than I could think, who saw more than I could see, who acted before I even knew there was something to act on. I turned slowly, looking around my apartment again, the same walls, the same furniture, the same life, but now every detail felt sharper, more defined, like I was seeing it through a different lens. I walked toward the window this time, not stopping short like before, but stepping closer, just enough to look out without hesitation. The street below looked exactly the same. Cars passing, people walking, nothing out of place, nothing unusual, and yet I knew better now. I knew how easily something could be hidden inside something ordinary. I pulled back, slightly, my reflection catching in the glass, my expression more focused than I remembered it ever being. And that was when my phone buzzed again, softer this time, less abrupt, but still enough to pull me back instantly. I looked down, the same number, my chest tightening just slightly before I answered. Yes, I said, my voice steadier now, more controlled, like I had learned something from the last few minutes. There was a brief pause. Then his voice, calm, familiar. Are you alone, Luca? Asked, and the question landed differently now. Heavier, more intentional. I glanced around the apartment, not searching, just confirming. Yes, I answered, and for a second, the silence stretched, like he was verifying something beyond what I could see. Good, he said finally, and that single word carried more weight than it should have. I leaned lightly against the wall, grounding myself again. What happened? I asked, because I needed to hear it, needed to understand something, even if it was only part of it. There was a pause, not long, but deliberate. They tested the boundary, he said, echoing what he had told me before, but now it sounded different, more complete. And now they know where it is. I frowned slightly, my mind following the logic but not the implications, which means I pressed, because I needed the rest of it. He did not hesitate, which means they will not make the same move again, he said, and something about that answer made my chest tighten again. Because it meant this was not finished, it had only shifted. So they are still out there, I said, quieter now, more aware. He did not deny it. Yes, he replied simply, and the certainty in his voice made it clear that this was not something that would disappear on its own. I exhaled slowly, my fingers brushing lightly against the wall beside me, grounding myself in something real. Then what changes? I asked, because something had to, something already had. He answered immediately. Now I know how they move, he said, and the confidence in that statement was absolute. Like the information alone had already given him control over the next step. I nodded slightly. Even though he could not see it, my thoughts shifting, adjusting, trying to keep up, and me, I asked, my voice softer now, because this part felt more personal, more uncertain. What changes for me? There was a brief silence, longer than before, and when he spoke again, his tone had shifted, not less controlled, but more direct, more intentional. You stay where you are tonight, he said, and the words felt like a decision already made, not something open for discussion. I frowned slightly, not in resistance, but in thought. And tomorrow? I asked, because I needed to see beyond this moment, needed to understand what came next. There was no hesitation. This time, tomorrow, he said, you do not go anywhere alone. The statement landed firmly, clearly, like a line drawn in place. I pushed off the wall slightly, walking back toward the center of the room, my movements slower now, more deliberate. That sounds less like a suggestion, I said, and there was a faint shift in his tone, something almost like acknowledgement. It is not, he replied, calm, steady, and I felt that again. That mix of control and something else, something that felt almost like protection but carried more weight than that. I stopped moving, my eyes settling on the table where my bag still sat, untouched, like it belonged to a different version of the day. You said I was not a coincidence, I said slowly, bringing it back to the one thing that still did not make sense. He did not respond immediately, and that silence told me this mattered. This was not something simple, not something he would answer lightly. I did, he said finally, his voice lower now, more measured. And you are not. I took a breath, steady, controlled. Then what am I? I asked, and for the first time since this began, the question felt real, not reactive, not driven by fear, but by something deeper, something that needed an answer. There was a pause, longer than any before, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something different, something that felt less like control and more like truth. You are the reason someone made a move they should not have made, he said, and the words settled into something I could not immediately understand, something that shifted the focus away from random danger and into something more intentional, more targeted. I frowned slightly, my mind trying to connect it, trying to see the pattern. That still does not tell me why, I said quietly, and this time his answer came softer, but no less certain. Not yet, he said, and the weight of those two words made it clear that this was not something he was avoiding. It was something he was working toward, something that would come, just not now. I stood there in the center of my apartment, the space feeling both familiar and completely different at the same time. My life still visible around me, but no longer untouched by what had started. And as I held the phone in my hand, listening to the quiet on the other end, I realized something I had not fully accepted until this moment. Whatever this was, whatever had begun with one night and one moment I could not control, it had already become something else, something that was no longer just happening around me, but through me. And as his voice came through one more time, steady, controlled, and closer than it had ever felt before, "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow changes everything." I understood that he was not just stating a possibility, he was setting something in motion, and for the first time, I did not question it, not because I fully trusted him, but because I knew that whatever came next, I was already part of it. I did not sleep. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint glow of city lights bleeding through the curtains, every sound amplified in the quiet, every shift of the building settling into my awareness like it meant something more than it should. I turned onto my side, then onto my back again, my mind replaying everything over and over. The bar, the drink, the moment I lost control, the way he appeared like he had been waiting for it, like he already knew. And that was the part one could not let go of, not the danger, not the fear, but the timing, the precision, the way none of it felt random anymore. I closed my eyes for a second, just to break the pattern, but it did not help. The silence was too loud, too full, like something was still watching even though I knew no one was there, or at least no one was supposed to be. Eventually I sat up, the sheets shifting around me as I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, the floor cool under my feet grounding me just enough to move. I walked to the window again, slower. This time, more deliberate, pulling the curtain back just slightly, not enough to expose myself, just enough to see. The street below quiet now, fewer cars, fewer people, the city settling into its own version of rest, and for a moment, it looked normal again, like nothing had happened, like nothing had changed, but I knew better. I let the curtain fall back into place, stepping away, my reflection catching briefly in the glass, my expression sharper than I remembered it ever being, more aware, more focused, like I had crossed into something I could not step back from. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the sound softer than before, but no less immediate. I did not hesitate this time. I picked it up, answering without looking at the screen. "Yes," I said, my voice steady, controlled. There was no pause, no delay, just his voice, exactly where I expected it to be. "You are awake," Lucas said, and there was something different in his tone, not less controlled, but more present, like he was closer now, not physically, but in awareness. I exhaled slowly, sitting back down on the edge of the bed. "I was not planning on sleeping," I replied, and there was a faint shift on the other end, something almost like acknowledgement. "Good," he said, simple, direct. "We do not have time to waste in the morning." I frowned slightly, my grip tightening on the phone just enough to notice. "You said tomorrow changes everything," I said, bringing it back to the words that had stayed with me. More than anything else, there was no hesitation, no deflection. "It does," he confirmed, and the certainty in his voice made it clear this was not a possibility. It was already decided. "How?" I asked, because I needed more than that. I needed something real, something I could understand. There was a brief pause, not uncertainty, just calculation. "Because tomorrow you are no longer going to pretend this is normal," he said, and the words settled into something heavier than I expected, something that shifted the entire frame of what I had been doing, pretending, acting, staying within a pattern. "Then what am I doing?" I asked, quieter now, more focused, because this was the moment where everything changed. He did not hesitate. "You are going to meet me," he said, and my breath caught slightly, not from fear, not exactly, but from the weight of it, the directness, the inevitability. "In person," I added, even though it was obvious, even though there was no other way to interpret it. "Yes," he replied simply, and something about that answer made everything feel more real, more immediate, because this would not be controlled from a distance anymore. This would be direct, present, unavoidable. I stood up, slowly, pacing once across the room, my thoughts moving faster now, trying to anticipate, trying to understand what this meant. "Why?" I asked, because that was still the center of everything, the question that had not been answered. There was a pause, longer this time, more deliberate, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something different, something closer to truth than anything he had said before. "Because you need to see what you are part of," he said, and the words settled into something I could not ignore. something that made it clear this was bigger than I had allowed myself to believe. I stopped pacing, my body stilling again as I processed that. "And what is that?" I asked, my voice steady but quieter, more careful. He did not answer immediately, and that silence told me everything. This was not simple. This was not something he would explain over a phone. "Tomorrow," he said finally, and the weight of that single word made it clear that whatever this was, it required more than distance, more than control. It required presence. I exhaled slowly, my hand running lightly over my arm as I grounded myself again. "Where?" I asked, because if this was happening, I needed to know how. "Where?" When? There was no hesitation this time. "I will send you the location in the morning," he said, his tone returning to that calm, controlled certainty, like the plan was already in place. Already moving forward, I nodded slightly. Even though he could not see it, my mind already shifting into something else, something more active, less reactive. "And until then," I said, because the night was not over, because the time between now and morning still mattered. There was no pause, no uncertainty, just the same steady control. "You stay inside," he said. "You do not answer the door, and you do not leave unless I tell you to." I let out a small breath, not frustration, not resistance, just acknowledgement, because at this point, I understood the pattern, the structure, the way this worked. I was inside something now, and he was the one guiding it, controlling it, shaping it. "And you," I said again, because that part had not changed, because I still needed to know he was there. He did not hesitate. "I am where I need to be," he replied. And something about the way he said it felt closer than before, more immediate, more real. I stood there in the quiet of my room, the city outside still moving, still existing, while everything inside me shifted into something else, something new, something I could not fully define yet. And as the call ended, as the silence settled around me once more, I realized that tomorrow was not just another day. It was a line, a point where everything before it ended and something else began. And for the first time since this started, I was not just reacting to what was happening, I was stepping into it willingly. Because whatever answers I was looking for, they were not going to come from standing still. They were waiting on the other side of whatever he was about to show me. And whether I was ready or not, I was already on my way there. I did not set an alarm, but I woke up before the sun fully rose, like my body already knew this was not a normal day. The light outside faint, soft, just beginning to stretch across the edges of the room, and for a moment I lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of everything settle into place. Not as confusion anymore, not as fear, but as something sharper, something more focused. Today was not about reacting. Today was about stepping into whatever this had become. I sat up slowly, the quiet of the apartment still intact, untouched, like nothing had happened, like the night before had not changed everything. But it had. I could feel it in the way my thoughts moved, clearer, more deliberate, less scattered. I stood, moving through my routine with a kind of calm I did not recognize in myself, getting dressed, brushing my hair, each movement steady, controlled, like I was preparing for something I could not fully see yet. My phone buzzed just as I finished, the sound cutting through the silence with precision. I picked it up immediately, the message already there, a location, nothing else, no explanation, no instructions, just coordinates, exact, intentional. I stared at it for a second longer than necessary, my pulse steady but present. Then I grabbed my keys, my bag, and moved toward the door. There was no hesitation this time, no pause at the handle, because I already knew this was the next step. I stepped outside. The morning air cool against my skin, the street quieter than usual, the city still waking up, and for the first time since this started, I did not feel watched, not because no one was there, but because I understood now that being watched was part of this, part of the structure, part of the control. I got into my car, starting the engine, the familiar sound grounding me again, but differently this time, not as comfort, but as readiness. I followed the route on my phone, the streets shifting, from familiar to unfamiliar, from my neighborhood into something more distant, more refined, buildings changing, sidewalks cleaner, everything more controlled, more curated. And when I turned onto the final street, I knew before I even stopped that this was not just a meeting. This was a statement. The building in front of me was not hidden, not subtle. It stood exactly where it wanted to be, tall, precise. guarded without looking guarded, the kind of place that did not need to announce what it was because it was already understood. I parked slowly, my eyes taking in the details without staring, the entrance, the structure, the quiet movement around it. And for a second, I just sat there, my hands resting on the steering wheel, my breath steady. This was it. This was where everything shifted. I stepped out of the car, the sound of the door closing behind me sharper than it should have been. And as I walked toward the entrance, I felt it again. That shift in the air, not pressure, not tension, just awareness. Like the space itself knew I was here. The doors opened before I reached them, smooth, automatic, but timed in a way that did not feel random. I stepped inside. The interior quiet, controlled, everything placed exactly where it should be. And for a moment, I did not see him, just the space, the structure, the way everything felt. Intentional. And then I did, standing at the far end of the room. Exactly where I expected him to be even though I had no reason to know. Luca, still, composed, his presence filling the space without needing to move. I stopped a few feet away, the distance between us deliberate, measured, and for a second, neither of us spoke. We just looked at each other, the silence not empty, but full, like everything that had happened was sitting between us, waiting to be acknowledged. You came, he said finally, his voice the same, calm, controlled, but different now that it was not through a phone, different now that it was real. I nodded slightly, my gaze steady. You said it would change everything, I replied, and my voice held more certainty than it had before, because now I was here, now I was part of it. He studied me for a moment, not assessing, not questioning, just observing, like he was confirming something he already believed. It already has, he said, and the words settled into something I could not deny, because he was right. Everything had changed. I took a small breath, grounding myself. Then tell me, I said, stepping just slightly closer, not enough to close the distance completely, but enough to show I was no longer standing back. What am I part of? The question hung between us, heavier than anything else, because this was it. This was the moment where everything would either make sense or become something else entirely. He did not answer immediately, and that silence felt different this time. Not controlled, not calculated, just intentional, like the weight of the answer mattered, like it could not be rushed. He stepped forward then, closing the distance just enough to shift the space between us, not invading, not overwhelming, just present. And when he spoke, his voice was lower, more direct than before. You are part of something that was not supposed to reach you, he said, and the words settled into something deeper than I expected, something that shifted the entire perspective again. I frowned slightly, my mind already trying to process it. Then why did it? I asked, because that was the piece that still did not fit, the piece that had started everything. He held my gaze, steady, unflinching, and for the first time, there was no distance in his answer, no space between what he knew and what he was saying. Because of me, he said, and the world seemed to still for a second, just enough for that truth to land. Not loud, not dramatic, just clear, undeniable, and everything shifted again, because now it was not just about me, it was about him, about something he carried, something that had reached me because of who he was. I took a small step back without meaning to, my breath catching. Slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of it, the realization, you are saying this started because of you. I said, my voice quieter now, more careful. He did not look away, did not soften, just nodded once. Yes, he replied, and the certainty in that single word made it impossible to ignore. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to understand what that meant, what it changed, what it pulled me into. And for the first time since this began, I saw it clearly, not just the control, not just the power, but the line that connected everything. The reason this was not random, the reason I was not a coincidence. And as the silence settled around us again, heavier now, more real, I realized something I had not fully accepted until this moment. This was not just a story I had stepped into. This was something that had been moving long before I noticed it. And now that I was standing here, looking at the man who had changed everything with a single sentence, there was no going back to the life I had before, only forward into something I still did not fully understand. And as he held my gaze, steady, certain, like he already knew exactly where this would lead, I understood one thing clearly. This was not where it ended. This was where it truly began.